After sitting on the workbench for nearly a year after completion, we are finally showcasing one of the first ever big city engines on Porterverse Workbench. This model is also my largest to date. Kacela was a bit of an impulse buy for me. You see, at the time, I wanted to have an articulated logging engine for my collection, basically a hyperfixation of that type of engine at the time. And after months of searching on eBay, I came across a really good deal, and eventually led to me making Kacela right now. And all this happened over a year ago now, so she is long overdue for a showcase. We'll go into a brief recap of Kacela's backstory, as it was mostly covered in Porterverse OCs already, and then we'll go into how I made the model itself. Here we go. Kacela was built for the Big City Logging Railroad shortly after the end of World War I. She was the strongest engine of the logging railroad. It was also one of the first documented sentient engines in the United States to identify as female. Kacela worked for the logging railroad until the company closed after most of Misty Island was deforested. Kacela wound up with the realtor company Hiroshi Realtors after the closure, and bounced around the lower 48 states with engines like Hero on Realtors until the company went bust in the 1970s. Kacela was miraculously saved and became an engine of the Big City Transportation Museum. Kacela was repainted into her original livery and placed on display in the Roundhouse. She's currently just a static display, but there are plans to get her running again by the end of the 2020s. The work is still underway as of 2025, and according to the Transportation Museum workers, they plan to have her fully operational again by around 2028-2029 or so. And Kacela herself eagerly awaits her return to service today. Kacela was a fun model. As stated earlier, I've always wanted an articulated logging engine in my fleet, and a very lucky find on eBay made it possible. She arrived during my house's emergency mold remediation last year, so all the progress pics were taken in a guest bedroom away from all the mold. Painting process was standard. It was actually easier since the model was technically unpainted. All starting with the brush-on gray acrylic, which acts as primer. This is a homemade mixture. And then several coats of the main colors. The logging logos, Dash, Bash, and Ferdinand, all have slight variations of each other's liveries. For Kacela, I ultimately decided I would use Dash's livery, because he was my favorite as a kid when the movie came out. So that means orange for the boiler and sand blue for the cab. The sand blue for the cab and tender was already very similar to the unpainted gray plastic, but still applied really well. Then a pumpkin orange was used for the boiler and accent details. All paints were made by Apple Barrel. Black and red acrylics were used for the cleanup work and running board sides respectively. And silver Sharpie was used for the boiler bands. And an orange paint pen was used for some of the super small details. So like cab windows, this little panel on the door here, and some little like trailing wheels too. The pistons were also painted in the sand blue. And then I added the tug style megaphone. I briefly considered giving her buffers, but I decided against it as I imagined that the Realtor company would have removed them, and that this is how Kacela will look in preservation. The original livery, but without buffers. After all the paintwork was done, I gave the model a matte clear coat. And just like that, Kacela was done. And all this happened in early 2024. Pretty crazy how fast time flies by sometimes. Kacela was honestly a really fun model to make. She isn't the smoothest runner that I have, and she does jump the tracks on curves. I know it's kind of ironic given her design, but regardless of that, I love this model. Just so much fun seeing an articulated engine. And she won't be the last of the Big City engines that I make. I have plans for engine interpretations of all the major Tux characters. All that is a very long ways away right now, but once I have my own place and a full layout, I will 100% start work on making characters like Tencent, Sunshine, Top Hat, all of them in locomotive form. So stay tuned for that in the distant future. Thank you all very much for watching this episode of Porterverse Workbench. and I shall see you all same time next week.